The diner smelled like burnt coffee and desperation, a scent I'd grown so accustomed to that it had become part of my skin. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even the healthiest customers look jaundiced. My feet ached in shoes held together more by hope than by the remaining stitches, and the grease-stained apron tied around my waist felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds after a double shift. I wiped down table 7 for the 3rd time, my movements automatic, mechanical. This was my life now, had been for the past 2 years. Wake up in my shoebox apartment where the heat only worked when it felt like it, take 2 buses to get here, smile at people who didn't see me, and pretend the tips I scraped together would somehow be enough to matter. "Sweetie, coffee!" barked Maurice from behind the counter, his thick Brooklyn accent cutting through the ambient noise of clinking dishes and mumbled conversations. "On it," I called back, reaching for the pot that had probably been sitting on the burner since the Clinton administration. It was a Tuesday night, which meant the diner was half empty, just the regulars nursing their bottomless cups, and a few stragglers who looked as lost as I felt. Rain had started to fall outside, creating ribbons of light on the windows as headlights passed by. The weather matched my mood perfectly. Gray, cold, relentless. I was refilling Mr. Peterson's cup. A 70-something widower who came in every night and always left exactly $1, no matter how long he stayed, when the door opened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I felt it before I saw him, that shift in the atmosphere when someone important enters a space. The kind of presence that makes every head turn, every conversation pause mid-sentence. I glanced up from Mr. Peterson's cup, and my breath caught in my throat. He stood in the doorway like he owned not just the diner, but the entire city block. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Even from across the room, I could see the perfect cut of the fabric, the way it moved with him like a second skin. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and strong lines, with eyes so dark they looked black in the dim lighting. But it wasn't just his appearance that made my hands tremble around the coffee pot. It was everything else. The way 2 men flanked him immediately, their eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency. The way he moved, unhurried, deliberate, like a predator who knew he had all the time in the world. The way the air itself seemed to bend around him, charged with something dangerous and magnetic. A 3rd man, older and built like a tank, held the door open and surveyed the street before giving a subtle nod. Maurice actually straightened up behind the counter. Maurice, who hadn't stood up straight in the decade I'd known him. The cook's spatula stopped mid-flip. Even Mr. Peterson's perpetual tremor seemed to still. I forced myself to look away, to focus on not spilling coffee all over Mr. Peterson's lap. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I didn't know who this man was, not specifically, but I knew what he was. You didn't grow up in this city without learning to recognize the signs, the expensive clothes, the armed escorts, the way people reacted to his presence like he was royalty, an executioner rolled into one. "Your usual booth, Mr. Constantine?" Maurice's voice had taken on a tone I'd never heard before, respectful, almost reverent, with an undercurrent of fear. Constantine. Even his name sounded dangerous. "That will be fine," he replied, and I nearly dropped the coffee pot. His voice was like smoke and whiskey, smooth, dark, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Russian, maybe, or some elegant hybrid of Eastern European influences that had been softened, but not erased by years in America. I kept my head down as I finished with Mr. Peterson, willing myself to be invisible. Whatever booth he took, please God, let it not be in my section. I had 4 tables to manage, surely one of the other waitresses could. "Emma." Maurice's voice cut through my silent prayer. I looked up to find him jerking his head toward the back corner booth, the best seat in the house, the one we reserved for, well, apparently for men like Constantine. My section. Of course. I smoothed my apron with trembling hands and grabbed a menu, even though something told me he wasn't here for the meatloaf special. As I approached, I kept my eyes on the worn linoleum floor, counting my steps. His 2 guards had positioned themselves strategically, One near the door, one at the counter where he could watch both the entrance and his boss. The older man who'd checked the street settled into the booth across the aisle, his jacket falling open just enough to reveal the shoulder holster underneath. I'd seen guns before. My ex-boyfriend had kept one in his apartment, thought it made him tough. But there was something different about seeing one on a man who actually knew how to use it, who wore it like it was just another accessory. "Good evening," I managed, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" I made the mistake of looking up. His eyes locked onto mine, and the world tilted. They were dark, impossibly dark, but there was something burning in their depths. Intelligence. Intensity. A kind of focused attention that made me feel like I was the only person in the entire city. In the split second before I could look away, I saw him take me in, really take me in. His gaze traveling from my face down to my worn shoes and back up again. I felt naked, exposed, like he could see every scar, every secret, every desperate hope I'd ever harbored. "Coffee," he said simply, still watching me with that unnerving intensity. "Black." "Right away," I murmured, already turning to escape. "And something for my associates." I paused, my pen hovering over my notepad, a prop really, since I'd just be getting coffee for everyone. "The same?" The guard in the booth across from him, silver-haired, with a face that had seen too many fights, nodded once. "The others would presumably get their own if they wanted it." I fled back to the counter, my pulse racing. Maurice raised an eyebrow at me as I grabbed the fresh pot, the good stuff we kept hidden for special occasions. "You okay, kid?" "Fine," I lied, arranging cups on a tray. "Who is he?" Maurice's expression darkened. "Nobody you want to know. Just be polite. Don't ask questions. And for the love of God, don't spill anything on him." "Great. Wonderful. Exactly the pep talk I needed." I carried the tray back with exaggerated care, convinced that every eye in the diner was watching me, waiting for me to mess up. My hands had steadied, though. Years of waitressing had taught me how to move even when terrified. It was like my body knew what to do even when my brain was screaming. I set the cups down without incident, poured the coffee with practiced precision, and was just about to ask if they needed anything else when the door burst open. Everything happened at once. 3 men rushed in, their intentions written in every aggressive line of their bodies. I saw the guns, actually saw them being drawn, and my mind went blank with terror. The guards around Constantine moved instantly, reaching for their own weapons, chairs scraping against linoleum as they stood. But I was closer. I was right there, standing next to Constantine's booth with a pot of scalding coffee in my hands, and one of the intruders, a wiry man with wild eyes and a pistol, was pointing his weapon directly at Constantine's head. I didn't think. There was no heroism in it, no conscious decision to be brave. It was pure instinct, the same instinct that makes you reach out to catch a falling child, to grab someone's arm before they step into traffic. My body moved before my brain could catch up, and I lunged forward just as the gun went off. The bullet hit me in the shoulder, and pain exploded through my body like white-hot lightning. The coffee pot fell from my hands, shattering on the floor in a cascade of ceramic and steaming liquid. I heard screaming, realized dimly that it might be coming from me, and then everything became chaos. More gunshots. Someone tackled me to the ground, covering my body with theirs. The weight was crushing, protective, and through the haze of agony, I smelled expensive cologne and gunpowder. Shouting in multiple languages, running footsteps, Maurice yelling something about calling the cops. Then silence. Heavy, ringing silence broken only by my own ragged breathing and the sound of rain against the windows. The weight on top of me shifted, and I found myself looking up into Constantine's face. We were on the floor, him hovering over me, one hand pressed against my shoulder, where blood was seeping through my uniform. His expression was thunderous, a rage so profound it made him look almost inhuman. But his touch was careful, gentle even. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice rough. "You're hit." I tried to speak, but pain lanced through me, stealing my breath. "Dmitri, call Dr. Volkov. Now." He barked the order without looking away from me, his hand maintaining pressure on my wound. "Tell him we're coming to him." "Boss, the police." "I don't care about the police." The fury in his voice made everyone in the diner flinch. This woman just took a bullet meant for me. We're not leaving her to bleed out while we wait for an ambulance. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, darkness creeping in. I tried to focus on his face. It seemed important somehow, to stay conscious, to understand what was happening. His jaw was clenched so tight, I could see the muscle jumping. And there was something in his eyes that looked almost like fear. No, that couldn't be right. Men like him didn't get scared. "Stay with me," he ordered, and it was an order, the kind of command that expected obedience. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Emma," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Emma Reeves." "Emma." He repeated it like he was memorizing it, branding it into his memory. "I'm going to pick you up now. It's going to hurt, but we need to get you help. Do you understand?" I managed a nod, and then his arms were sliding under me, careful of my shoulder but firm, and he lifted me like I weighed nothing. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through my body, and I couldn't stop the cry that escaped my lips. "I know," he murmured, something almost soft entering his voice. "I know. Just hold on." Through the pain, through the fear and confusion, one thought managed to crystallize in my fading consciousness. My life had just changed forever, and I didn't even know if I'd survive long enough to see how. I woke up in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. For a few disoriented seconds, I didn't remember anything. Didn't know where I was, or why my shoulder felt like it had been set on fire and then wrapped in cotton. The sheets against my skin were Egyptian cotton, maybe higher, the kind of fabric I'd only ever touched while folding laundry for the family I'd cleaned houses for during college. Above me, a crystal chandelier caught the morning light, scattering rainbow prisms across a ceiling that had actual crown molding. This wasn't a hospital. Memory crashed back in waves. The diner, the guns, the bullet tearing through my flesh, Constantine's face hovering over mine. I tried to sit up, and pain immediately reminded me why that was a terrible idea. "Easy." A woman's voice, accented and calm. "The doctor said you must not move suddenly." I turned my head, slowly this time, to find a woman in her 50s sitting in a chair beside the bed. She had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing what looked like a nurse's uniform. "Where am I?" My voice came out scratchy, raw. "Mr. Constantine's residence. I am Irina, the house nurse." She stood, pouring water from a crystal pitcher into a glass. "You were brought here last night after the incident. Dr. Volkov operated on you. The bullet passed through cleanly. You were very lucky." "Lucky. Right, getting shot definitely felt like winning the lottery." She helped me take small sips of water, and gradually, my surroundings came into sharper focus. The bedroom was enormous, bigger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked what appeared to be a private garden, though I could see the tops of buildings beyond the high stone walls. The furniture was all dark wood and elegant lines, expensive without being ostentatious. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces I vaguely recognized from museum visits I could never afford. "How long have I been here?" 12 hours. It is almost noon." Irina adjusted my pillows with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Constantine has been very concerned. He has checked on you 4 times, though you were sleeping." The idea of him standing over me while I slept sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with pain. "I need to call my work. Maurice will be worried, and I'm supposed to have a shift tonight." "Already handled," a deep voice said from the doorway. I froze. Constantine stood there, somehow looking even more imposing in the daylight streaming through the windows. He'd changed from the suit I remembered. This one was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar, no tie. Even casually dressed, he radiated power. His dark hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else. Tobacco, maybe, and cedar. "Your employer has been informed that you'll be taking medical leave," he continued, stepping into the room with that same predatory grace I remembered from the diner. "Paid, of course. I've also settled your rent for the next 6 months and covered your medical expenses. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process. What? No, I can't accept. You can, and you will. He moved closer, and Irina discreetly excused herself, closing the door behind her. You took a bullet meant for me, Emma. Do you understand what that means? It means I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Pain was making me bold, or maybe just stupid. It doesn't mean you owe me anything. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he pulled up the chair Irina had vacated, sitting down so we were at eye level. Up close, I could see details I'd missed in the chaos. A small scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. The way his eyes weren't quite black, but rather the darkest brown I'd ever seen. Let me be very clear about something, he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. In my world, debts are sacred, life debts especially. You put yourself between me and a bullet. Whether you meant to or not is irrelevant. That action created a bond, an obligation that I will honor. I don't want to be in your world, I whispered, fear finally catching up to the shock. I don't even know what your world is. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, though it held no humor. You already are, Emma. The moment you stepped in front of that gun, you became part of it. Those men who tried to kill me, they failed, thanks to you, but they work for people who don't accept failure kindly, which means anyone associated with me becomes a target. The implications crashed over me like ice water. You're saying they'll come after me? They already are. He pulled out his phone, swiped through a few screens, and showed me a photograph. It was my apartment building, except the door to my unit hung off its hinges, and I could see the destruction inside. Furniture overturned, belongings scattered. They hid it this morning, looking for information about you. Fortunately, I'd already posted men there to collect your things. Everything important has been brought here. I couldn't breathe. My home, my safe space, however shabby, violated and destroyed. This is insane. I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress. Why would anyone— Because you saved my life, he interrupted, leaning forward. Because in doing so, you humiliated Sergei Volkov's organization. They came to kill me in a public place, to send a message, and instead, a waitress made them look incompetent. That kind of embarrassment demands retaliation. Volkov? The name meant nothing to me. My rival. Another businessman in the city. The pause before businessman told me everything I needed to know about the nature of his business. He's been trying to expand into my territory for months. Last night was supposed to be his decisive move. I closed my eyes, feeling tears burn behind my lids. So what happens now? I just hide here forever? You stay here until I've dealt with the threat, he said simply. Under my protection. It's the only way to keep you safe. And then what? Eventually you'll deal with the threat, and I go back to my life like none of this happened? I opened my eyes to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch, perhaps. His gaze drifted to my injured shoulder, and something dark flashed across his face. Or perhaps we'll find that some things can't simply return to how they were. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. I need to attend to some business. Irina will bring you lunch and your medication. Rest. We'll talk more tonight. He stood, and I should have been relieved to have him leave, to have space to process this nightmare. But instead, I felt strangely bereft, like a lifeline was being taken away. Mr. Konstantin, Alexei, he corrected, pausing at the door. In private, you call me Alexei. Alexei. I tested the name, feeling it strange on my tongue. Why are you really doing this? You could have just paid my hospital bills and walked away. Why bring me here? Why all this? He was quiet for a long moment, his back to me, his hand on the doorframe. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I couldn't decipher. Because when I saw you fall, when I saw your blood on my hands. He turned, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole my breath. I realized that your life had become the most valuable thing in my world. And I protect what's mine, Emma. Always. He left before I could respond, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in the sudden silence. I stared at the ceiling, my mind reeling. What's mine? Like I was a possession, something to be claimed and guarded. I should have been furious, should have been planning my escape despite the danger, but all I could think about was the look in his eyes. Possessive, yes, but also something else, something that looked almost like desperation. The days blurred together in a haze of medication and surreal luxury. Irina checked on me regularly, changing my bandages with gentle efficiency, and bringing meals that looked like they'd been prepared by a Michelin star chef. I learned that Alexei employed a full household staff, a cook, several security personnel who rotated shifts, a housekeeper who made my bed with military precision every morning. But I rarely saw him. Sometimes I'd hear his voice drifting up from downstairs, usually speaking Russian in tones that ranged from coldly authoritative to explosively angry. Other times, I'd wake in the middle of the night to find evidence he'd been in my room, a glass of water on the nightstand that hadn't been there before, my blanket tucked more carefully around me, once even a book on the chair that I'd mentioned wanting to read to Irina. He was protecting me, watching over me, but keeping his distance. It made me feel like a bird in a gilded cage, cared for, safe, but still trapped. By the fourth day, I was going stir-crazy. My shoulder was healing well enough that I could move around without wanting to scream, and I couldn't stand being confined to the bedroom any longer. Against Irina's protests, I ventured out, exploring the house. It was a mansion, really, 3 stories of old-world elegance mixed with modern security. I counted at least 12 bedrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a formal dining room that could seat 20, and a living area with furniture that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Cameras were discreetly placed in corners, and I noticed the security personnel, always professional, always watching. I found Alexei in his study on the 2nd floor. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see him behind a massive mahogany desk, talking on the phone in rapid Russian. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, his jaw tight with tension. As I watched, he rubbed his temples, a gesture so human it made my chest ache. He hung up and looked up, somehow knowing I was there despite my silence. "You should be resting," he said, but there was no real reprimand in his voice. "I've been resting for 4 days. I'm going crazy up there." I stepped into the room, taking in the walls lined with books and what looked like expensive vodka. "Don't you have TVs in this place?" 3 in your room alone. Did you not see them hidden in the armoire?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "I can have someone show you." "I don't want to watch TV," I interrupted. "I want answers. What's happening out there? Have you dealt with the threat?" His expression shuddered. "It's being handled." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." He stood, moving around the desk toward me. "This isn't your concern, Emma." "Not my concern?" I felt anger surge through me, welcome after days of feeling helpless. "People destroyed my apartment because of me. I'm trapped here because of me. How is this not my concern?" "Because I'm handling it." His voice rose, filling the room with its force. Then, visibly, he reined himself in, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Because the less you know about what I do, the safer you are. Do you understand? Information is dangerous in my world. The wrong word to the wrong person could—" He cut himself off, turning away, but not before I saw something flash across his face. Fear again. For me. "Could what?" I pressed, moving closer despite every instinct telling me to back away. "What are you protecting me from, Alexei?" He spun back, and suddenly he was right there, inches away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "From everything," he said, his voice dropping to something rough and raw. "From Volkov, from my enemies, from anyone who would hurt you to get to me, from the violence and ugliness of what I am." "And what are you?" I whispered, tilting my head back to meet his eyes. His hand came up, almost of its own accord, his fingers ghosting along my jaw so gently I barely felt it. "A monster who's somehow found something precious," he murmured. "And monsters, Emma, they destroy everything they touch." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "You haven't destroyed me, yet." But his thumb brushed across my cheekbone, belying his words. "But I will keep you safe, even if it means keeping you from myself." He stepped back abruptly, putting distance between us, and the loss of his proximity felt like a physical ache. "Dmitri will take you shopping tomorrow," he said, his voice returning to businesslike efficiency. "You need clothes, personal items, whatever you want. I don't want your money," I said quietly. "I just want to understand what's happening to my life." He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Your life is no longer what it was, Emma. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. And what is it now? Mine to protect," he said simply. "Whether you want it to be or not." The nightmares started on the 5th night. I woke up screaming, the phantom sensation of the bullet tearing through my flesh so vivid I could smell the gunpowder. My shoulder throbbed in sympathy with the memory, and I was thrashing against the sheets, trying to escape an invisible threat, when the door burst open. Alexei stood there in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, wearing only dark pajama pants. His chest was bare, and even through my panic, I registered the landscape of scars crisscrossing his skin, evidence of a violent life I could only imagine. He had a gun in his hand, held with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been reaching for weapons in the middle of the night for years. "Emma." He scanned the room with professional efficiency before his eyes settled on me, and the gun disappeared somewhere behind his back. "You're safe. It was a dream." My voice cracked, and I hated how weak I sounded. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I wasn't sleeping." He moved closer, and I noticed the dark circles under his eyes had deepened. "I was working. At 3 a.m? My work doesn't follow a schedule." He sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. "Tell me about the dream." I shook my head, wrapping my arms around myself. "It's stupid. Just reliving that night." "Not stupid." His voice was gentle in a way I hadn't heard before. "You experienced trauma. Your mind is processing it the only way it knows how." We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself studying him in the dim light. The scars weren't just on his chest. There was a particularly vicious one along his ribs, another across his shoulder. Bullet wounds, knife wounds, evidence of a life lived on the edge of violence. "How do you do it?" I asked quietly. "Live with this every day? The danger, the violence, never knowing if..." "You get used to it." He looked down at his hands, strong hands that I'd seen be both gentle and, I imagined, deadly. "Or you go numb to it. Either way, it becomes normal." "That's sad." His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Perhaps. But it's the life I chose. Did you, though? Choose it?" I don't know what made me brave enough to ask, but something about the darkness, the intimacy of the moment, made it feel possible. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My father was Bratva, Russian Mafia. I was born into this world, raised in it. By the time I was old enough to understand what choice meant, I was already too deep to get out." He glanced at me, and in the shadows, his eyes looked almost haunted. "But I made it mine. Built something bigger, stronger. That was my choice. Do you ever regret it? Every time I see innocence destroyed by it." His gaze held mine. "Every time someone like you gets caught in the crossfire." The weight of his words settled between us. I should have been afraid. I was in bed with a man who just admitted to being a crime lord, who probably had blood on his hands, who lived in a world I couldn't begin to comprehend. But all I felt was a strange pull, like gravity was shifting, and he was becoming my center. "Go back to sleep, Emma," he said softly, standing. "I'll stay until you do." "You don't have to." "I know." He moved to the chair by the window, settling into it with the ease of someone who'd spent many nights keeping watch. "But I will anyway." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't need a babysitter. But the truth was, knowing he was there, that solid presence between me and whatever darkness lurked outside, made me feel safer than I had in years. I fell asleep watching him silhouette against the window, guardian and captor all at once. Shopping with Dmitri was an experience I'd never forget. The silver-haired guard who'd been in the diner that night drove me in a black SUV with windows so tinted I could barely see out. 2 more vehicles followed us, one ahead, one behind. forming a protective convoy that made me feel simultaneously important and terrified. "Is all this really necessary?" I asked, as Dmitri opened my door outside an exclusive boutique in a part of the city I'd only ever seen in magazines. "Mr. Constantine's orders," he replied in his thick accent, his eyes constantly scanning the street. "Your safety is priority." The boutique staff seemed to be expecting us. An elegant woman in her 40s greeted us by name, leading us to a private shopping area where champagne and petit fours waited. I felt like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. Except I wasn't a prostitute, and my benefactor was significantly more dangerous than Richard Gere. "I can't afford any of this," I whispered to Dmitri, as the woman started pulling designer dresses. He looked at me like I'd said something amusing. "Mr. Constantine has a count. Money is not concern." It wasn't concern for him, maybe, but it was definitely a concern for me. Every piece of clothing, every pair of shoes, every item they added to the growing pile represented more debt, more obligation to a man I barely knew, but who somehow had complete control over my life. Still, I couldn't deny the thrill of slipping into clothes that actually fit, that were made from fabrics that felt like butter against my skin. The woman, Margot, had an expert eye, selecting pieces that flattered without being ostentatious. Casual wear, professional attire, evening gowns that made me look like someone I didn't recognize in the mirror. "This one," Dmitri said suddenly, pointing to a deep emerald dress that hugged my curves before flowing out in elegant waves. "Mr. Constantine would like this one." I felt my cheeks heat. How would you know what Mr. Constantine likes? His expression remained neutral, but I caught the hint of amusement in his eyes. "I know Boss for 20 years. I know. They boxed up everything. Thousands of dollars worth of clothing I hadn't asked for and didn't need." Margot handed Dmitri a discreet black bag separately, whispering something in French that made him nod approvingly. Next was a salon, where my hair was cut and styled by someone who treated it like precious silk, rather than the dull, lifeless mess I'd been managing. Then a spa, where I was buffed and polished and massaged until I felt like a different person entirely. By the time we returned to the mansion, evening was falling, and I was exhausted in the way you get when people have been fussing over you for hours. "You look beautiful, Miss Emma," Irina said when she saw me, her eyes warm with approval. "Mr. Constantine has requested you join him for dinner tonight. 8 o'clock, in the formal dining room." My stomach flipped. "Dinner? Why?" She smiled like she knew something I didn't. "I think perhaps he wants to see you." I stood outside the dining room at exactly 8 o'clock, my palms sweating despite the elegant emerald dress Dmitri had selected. Through the partially open door, I could see candles flickering on a table set for two, crystal glasses catching the light. This felt like a date, which was insane, because I was essentially a prisoner here, wasn't I? Protected, yes, but still unable to leave, still dependent on Alexei's mercy and protection. "Are you going to stand in the hallway all night? Or are you going to come in?" His voice startled me. I pushed the door open to find Alexei standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He'd changed into a black suit with a crisp white shirt, no tie, the top buttons undone. He looked devastating, like sin and salvation wrapped in expensive Italian wool. I wasn't sure if this was... I trailed off, not knowing how to finish. If this was what? He turned, and his eyes traveled over me slowly, taking in every detail of the dress, my hair, the way I'd been transformed. Something hot and hungry flashed in his gaze before he banked it. "You look exquisite." Dmitri picked the dress. Dmitri has excellent taste. He moved to the table, pulling out a chair for me. "Please, sit." Dinner was brought in by silent staff, course after course of food that tasted like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. We ate in relative silence at first, the tension between us thick enough to cut. I was hyper-aware of everything, the way he held his wine glass, the occasional glances he sent my way, the controlled grace in his every movement. "How was shopping?" he asked finally, swirling the wine in his glass. "Expensive," I replied honestly. Dmitri wouldn't let me look at any price tags. "Because price is irrelevant." He set down his glass, fixing me with that intense stare. "I told you, Emma. I protect what's mine. That includes making sure you have everything you need. I'm not yours, I said quietly, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Aren't you? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're living in my house, under my protection, wearing clothes I bought you. You dream, and I come running. You breathe, and my men stand guard. Tell me how you're not mine. Because I didn't choose this, I shot back, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. You chose it for me. You decided I needed saving, needed protecting, needed to be locked away like some treasure you're hoarding. Is that what you think? His voice dropped dangerously low. That you're a possession to me? What else am I supposed to think? I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You won't let me leave. Won't tell me what's happening. Won't. I didn't see him move. One moment he was seated. The next he was there, his hand wrapping around my wrist, not painful, but firm. His other hand came up to cup my face, tilting it up so I had no choice but to meet his eyes. You want to know what you are to me? His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I felt my breath catch. You're the woman who threw herself in front of a bullet for me. The woman whose blood on my hands made me feel something I haven't felt in 15 years. Fear. Pure, absolute fear that I would lose something I didn't even know I needed. Alexei, I have built an empire on fear and respect, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. I have everything money can buy, power most men only dream of. And in one moment, one stupid, brave, impossible moment, you became worth more than all of it. So yes, Emma, you are mine. Because I am yours, whether you want me or not. The world seemed to stop. His face was so close to mine, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made my knees weak. I could feel his breath against my lips, could smell his cologne mixed with the wine we'd been drinking. This is crazy, I whispered. I know. You barely know me. I know enough. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I couldn't suppress the shiver that ran through me. I know you're brave and stubborn. I know you have terrible taste in apartments and work too hard for too little. I know you drink your coffee with too much sugar, and you hum when you think no one is listening. You've been watching me. Every second I can. He leaned in, his forehead nearly touching mine. Tell me to stop, Emma. Tell me you want me to let you go, to release you from this, and I will. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere far from here with enough money to start over. Just say the word. It was the escape I'd been thinking about, the freedom I'd been craving. All I had to do was say yes, and he'd let me go. I could see it in his eyes. It would destroy him, but he'd do it. I should have said yes, should have run from this dangerous, impossible man and his dark world. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. He froze for a heartbeat, and I thought maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. Then his hand tightened on my waist, pulling me flush against him, and he kissed me back with a hunger that stole my breath. It was nothing like any kiss I'd ever experienced. It was possession and desperation, and need all tangled together, burning through me like wildfire. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black with desire. Emma, he said, my name a prayer and a curse. Do you understand what this means? I nodded, unable to speak. Say it. I need to hear you say it. I'm yours, I whispered, and felt the words settle into my bones like truth. And you're mine. The smile that crossed his face was beautiful and terrifying all at once. Yes, he murmured, pulling me close again. God help us both. I woke up in Alexei's bed. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows I didn't recognize, and the sheets beneath me were black silk, a stark contrast to the white linens of the guest room I'd been occupying. My dress from last night lay pooled on the floor like a green puddle, and I was wearing one of Alexei's shirts, the fabric soft and smelling like him. We hadn't had sex. That fact became clear as I took inventory of my body, still sore from the healing gunshot wound, but untouched in other ways. After that kiss in the dining room, after I'd admitted what we both knew, Alexei had simply held me. We'd moved to his room because he refused to let me out of his sight, and we'd fallen asleep tangled together, his arm a protective band around my waist. The bathroom door opened, and he emerged in dress pants and a partially buttoned shirt, his hair still damp from the shower. When he saw I was awake, something soft entered his expression. Good morning, he said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. His hand came up to brush hair from my face, the gesture achingly tender. How do you feel? Confused, I admitted. Good, but confused. That's fair. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to my forehead. I have meetings today that I can't avoid. Dmitri will stay with you, and there are 4 men posted around the house at all times. Reality crashed back in. The threat. Volkov. Is it being handled? He said firmly. But until it's completely resolved, you don't leave this house without me. Understood? There was steel in his voice, the tone of a man used to being obeyed. Part of me wanted to bristle at the command, but the larger part recognized it for what it was. Fear dressed up as control. Understood, I said quietly. He studied me for a moment, then reached into his nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. Give me your hand. I extended my right hand, and he slipped something onto my ring finger. A band of white gold set with a single, perfect diamond, not huge or ostentatious, but clearly expensive and undeniably beautiful. Alexei, what, if anyone asks, you're my fiancé, he said, his eyes holding mine. It's the best protection I can give you right now. In my world, attacking another man's wife or intended is complicated. It brings consequences that even men like Volkov think twice about. So this is fake, I said, trying to ignore the strange disappointment curling in my chest. His jaw tightened. Nothing about what I feel for you is fake, Emma. But yes, for now, it's a tactical decision. He raised my hand to his lips, kissing the ring. One I hope won't always be. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. I have to go. Irina will bring you breakfast. Stay inside. Stay safe. He kissed me once more, hard and possessive, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with a ring on my finger and a future I couldn't begin to predict. The days developed a strange rhythm. Alexei would leave early, returning late, always with that same tension in his shoulders that spoke of deals made and threats neutralized. We'd have dinner together, talk about everything except his business. And then we'd retreat to his bedroom where he'd hold me like I might disappear if he let go. We still hadn't slept together, not in that way. He touched me constantly, kissed me until I couldn't breathe, but always stopped before things went too far. Not until you're healed, he'd murmur against my skin when I tried to push further. Not until you're choosing me with a clear head. Not gratitude or fear or whatever else you might be feeling. It was both frustrating and endearing. This unexpected chivalry from a man who could order deaths with a phone call. 2 weeks after the shooting, Irina declared my shoulder healed enough to remove the bandages permanently. The scar tissue was still pink and tender, but functional. I stared at it in the mirror, a permanent reminder of the night my life changed. It gives you character, Alexei said from the doorway of the bathroom. I hadn't heard him come home. It's ugly, I replied, tracing the puckered skin. He moved behind me, his hands coming to rest on my hips as he looked at our reflection. It's proof you survived, that you're stronger than you knew. His lips brushed my shoulder, just above the scar. It's beautiful, because it's part of you. I turned in his arms, and the heat in his eyes made my breath catch. Alexei, I eliminated Volkov's operation last night, he said abruptly. His lieutenants are either dead or have sworn loyalty to me. The threat to you is over. The words should have filled me with relief. Instead, I felt something like dread. So I can leave now? His arms tightened around me. You could. I wouldn't stop you. His voice dropped to something raw, but I'm asking you not to. I'm asking you to stay, to give this, us, a real chance. Why? I needed to hear it, needed to understand what I was to him beyond a debt and an obsession. Because I love you, he said simply. And the world tilted. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. But somewhere between watching you fall and watching you heal, between every nightmare I chased away, and every morning I woke up grateful you were still here, I fell completely in love with you. Tears burned in my eyes. I don't even know who you really are. What you do, the things you've done, I'm a criminal, he said bluntly. I run an organization that deals in things you'd find reprehensible. I've killed people, Emma. I've ordered deaths. I've built my empire on fear and blood, and I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. His hand came up to cup my face. but I would burn it all down before I let anything happen to you. That's who I am with you. That's not enough, I whispered, even as my heart was screaming the opposite. I know. He pressed his forehead to mine, so I'm going to give you time. Stay here, or I'll set you up somewhere else. Your choice. Get to know me, the real me. Ask me anything, and I'll answer honestly. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, tell me what you want. And if I want to leave for good, pain flashed across his face, but his voice remained steady. Then I'll let you go. It will destroy me, but I'll do it. I looked at this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd turned my world upside down and made a decision that terrified me. Ask me to stay, I said softly. Hope blazed in his eyes. Emma. No tactics, no strategy. Just you, asking me. He took a shaky breath, and I'd never seen him look so vulnerable. Stay with me. Please. Let me show you who I can be for you. Let me love you the way you deserve. I kissed him, pouring everything I couldn't say into it, the fear and the hope and the impossible, terrifying thing growing in my chest that felt like love. Okay, I whispered against his lips. I'll stay. 3 months later, I stood in Alexei's study, staring at the documents spread across his desk. Financial records, business dealings, the full scope of his operations laid bare because I'd asked to see them. He sat in his chair, watching me process it all, his expression guarded but honest. Money laundering, I said, pointing to one section. Through legitimate businesses. Yes. Protection rackets. In certain territories, yes. Weapons dealing. He hesitated. Primarily defensive sales to allied organizations. I don't deal in chemical or biological weapons, and I have strict policies against sales that target civilians. I looked up at him. You're trying to make this sound noble. No, he said quietly. I'm trying to be honest. There's nothing noble about what I do, Emma. But there are lines even I won't cross. I moved to the next document, this one detailing charitable donations. Millions of dollars to hospitals, schools, orphanages. This is you too? Money is just a tool. How you use it matters. He stood, moving around the desk to stand beside me. I grew up in poverty, Emma. Real poverty. The kind where you wonder if you'll eat that day. When I finally had power, I decided some of it would go to making sure other kids didn't grow up the way I did. It was all too much. The violence and the charity, the cruelty and the kindness. He was a walking contradiction, and I was falling deeper in love with him every day. I met with a lawyer yesterday, I said abruptly. He went still. About what? About working again. Not at the diner. Maurice sold it last month anyway, but I can't just exist here, Alexei. I need purpose. What did you want to do? Before all this? Social work, I admitted. I was in school for it before I ran out of money. I wanted to help people. Something shifted in his expression. Then go back. Finish your degree. I'll pay for it. I don't want your money. It's not about the money, he interrupted. It's about you having what you need to become who you want to be. Let me give you that, Emma. Please. We'd had versions of this argument a dozen times. My independence versus his need to provide for me. But lately, I'd started to understand that for him, taking care of me wasn't about control. It was about love, expressed in the only way he knew how. On one condition, I said. Anything. The ring stops being fake. He froze, his eyes searching mine. Emma, I love you, I said, the words coming easier now that I'd admitted them to myself. I love you despite everything I should fear about you, or maybe because of it. I love the way you hold me at night like I'm precious. I love that you've killed people, but you won't make love to me until you're sure I'm choosing you freely. I love your contradictions and your darkness, and the way you look at me like I'm your salvation. You are, he said roughly, pulling me into his arms. You're the only good thing I've ever had. Then marry me. Really marry me. Not as protection, not as strategy. Marry me because we're both too far gone to imagine life without each other. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, and when he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. Yes, he said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small, private, held in the garden of Alexei's estate on a cool October morning 3 weeks later. I'd imagined in my old life that when I got married it would be a big affair, family, friends, a church filled with well-wishers. But that Emma was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the people who mattered could fit in a small garden, and that safety sometimes meant secrecy. Dmitri stood as Alexei's best man, his weathered face uncharacteristically emotional. Irina served as my maid of honor, having spent the morning helping me into a simple white dress. Elegant, understated, nothing like the elaborate gown I'd once pinned to a Pinterest board I'd now deleted. The handful of Alexei's most trusted men lined the perimeter, their presence a reminder that even in joy, we lived in a world where vigilance never stopped. The officiant was a priest Alexei had known since childhood, an old man with kind eyes who asked no questions about the speed of our courtship or the armed guards at our wedding. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, just a path through the garden I'd come to love, I saw Alexei waiting for me, and everything else fell away. He wore a black suit that made him look like sin incarnate, but his eyes held only reverence as he watched me approach. When I reached him, he took my hands, and I felt him trembling. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered, as the priest began speaking. "Never thought I deserved it." "You don't," I whispered back, a smile tugging at my lips. "But you have it anyway." The ceremony was brief, the words traditional but weighted with meaning neither of us took lightly. When the priest pronounced us married and Alexei kissed me, I tasted salt and realized he was crying. This dangerous, powerful man was crying at our wedding. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "My Emma. My wife." "I love you too," I replied, and meant it with every fiber of my being. The first year of marriage was an education in contradictions. I went back to school, finishing my degree in social work while navigating the strange reality of being married to a crime lord. Alexei kept his promise. I saw everything, knew everything. The good, the bad, the ugly truth of how he made his money and maintained his power. He never lied to me, never tried to paint himself as anything other than what he was. But I also saw the other side, the hospital wing he funded, the scholarship program for kids from the old neighborhood, the way his men were fiercely loyal not just from fear, but from genuine respect. He was a monster to his enemies, and a savior to those he protected. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, using my maiden name to keep my connection to Alexei hidden. The women there didn't need to know their counselor was married to the man half the city feared. What mattered was that I could help them, could use the resources at my disposal, Alexei's resources, to give them fresh starts. "You're laundering my money through good deeds," Alexei observed one night, watching me work on a grant proposal at his desk. "Is that a problem?" I challenged, looking up. He smiled. That rare, genuine smile he reserved only for me. "No, it's brilliant. You're brilliant." He'd kept his other promise, too. We made love for the first time on our wedding night, and it was everything I'd imagined and more. Gentle and fierce, tender and desperate, the physical manifestation of everything we felt but struggled to express. In bed, there were no walls between us, no darkness he couldn't share, no part of me I kept hidden. But it wasn't all perfect. 6 months into our marriage, I was working late at the shelter when 2 men approached me in the parking lot. I recognized the look immediately. The same predatory focus I'd seen on the men who'd tried to kill Alexei at the diner. "Mrs. Constantine," one of them said, and my blood ran cold at the use of my married name. "You're going to come with us." I ran. It was stupid, probably futile, but instinct took over. I made it maybe 10 feet before one of them grabbed me, his hand clamping over my mouth as I tried to scream. The other one was reaching for something in his jacket when a black SUV screeched into the parking lot. Dmitri emerged like an avenging angel, his gun already drawn. "Release her. Now." The men froze, then slowly let me go. I stumbled forward, and Dmitri caught me, positioning himself between me and the threat. "Tell your boss that touching Constantine's wife means war," Dmitri said calmly, "and Constantine doesn't lose wars." The men disappeared into the shadows, and Dmitri bundled me into the SUV where 2 more guards waited. My phone was already ringing, Alexei's name flashing on the screen. "I'm okay," I said before he could speak. "Dmitri got here in time. I'm 10 minutes away. His voice was arctic, controlled in a way that promised violence. Stay on the phone with me. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. When we finally pulled up to the estate, Alexei was waiting, and the look on his face would have terrified me if it had been directed at me. He pulled me from the car, his hands running over me, checking for injuries with barely controlled panic. I'm fine, I kept repeating. Alexei, I'm fine. He crushed me against his chest and I felt him shaking. I should never have let you work there. It was stupid, reckless. No. I pulled back, forcing him to meet my eyes. Don't do this. Don't take away the things that make me who I am because you're scared. I'm terrified, he admitted roughly. Every second you're not with me, I'm terrified. And tonight proved I'm right to be. Tonight proved that your protection works. Dmitri was there. Your men were watching. The system you put in place kept me safe. This time. His hands cupped my face, and I saw the fear warring with anger in his eyes. What about next time? What about when I'm not fast enough, when my men aren't close enough? Then we deal with it together, I said firmly. But you don't get to lock me away, Alexei. That's not the deal we made. We argued about it for hours, both of us too scared and angry to back down. Finally, we reached a compromise. I could continue my work, but security would be increased, and I'd check in every hour. It wasn't perfect, but it was a balance we could both live with. The men who'd approached me were found 3 days later, dumped on the doorstep of their boss with a message that made the news. Konstantin's wife is untouchable. I probably should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a savage satisfaction that Alexei had made his point so clearly. I found out I was pregnant on a rainy Tuesday in April. I'd been feeling off for weeks, exhausted, nauseous, emotional in ways that didn't make sense. Irina had given me a knowing look and suggested I take a test. And now I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at 2 pink lines that were about to change everything. Alexei found me there an hour later, still frozen, the test clutched in my hand. Emma? He knelt beside me, concern etched in every line of his face. What's wrong? I held up the test wordlessly. He stared at it, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and then something so tender it made my heart ache. You're pregnant? Yes. My voice came out shaky. How do you feel about that? He pulled me into his arms, his face buried in my hair. Terrified, he admitted. And so happy I can barely breathe. You're going to have my baby, Emma. We're going to be parents. I don't know how to raise a child in your world, I whispered against his chest. How do we keep them safe? How do we give them a normal life when nothing about us is normal? We figure it out together, he said, echoing my words from months ago. We protect them, we love them, and we make sure they never want for anything, especially safety and affection. Over the next months, I watched Alexei transform. The man who'd built an empire on fear became obsessive about baby-proofing the house. He interviewed pediatricians with the same intensity he vetted business partners. He read every parenting book he could find, and I'd often wake up to find him with his hand on my growing belly, talking to our daughter in Russian. Yes, daughter. The ultrasound had revealed we were having a girl, and Alexei had actually cried when he saw her on the screen. A little girl, he'd murmured wonderingly. I'm going to have a daughter. God help any boy who tries to date her, I'd replied, and he'd laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as my pregnancy progressed. But he'd also started making changes to his business. Legitimate ventures were expanded while the more dangerous operations were scaled back or handed off to trusted lieutenants. He was preparing, I realized, to be the kind of father who could be present, who wouldn't risk leaving his daughter without a parent. I want to step back, he told me one night. His hand splayed across my belly where our daughter was kicking. Not completely. I'll never be fully legitimate. But I want to be here for you both. I want to coach her soccer team and scare away her boyfriends and walk her down the aisle someday. You're going soft, Konstantin, I teased, but my eyes were wet. Only for you two, he murmured, kissing me. The rest of the world can still fear me. Our daughter was born on a snowy December morning, exactly 3 years and 2 weeks after the night I took a bullet in a diner. Labor was brutal. 14 hours of pain that made getting shot feel like a paper cut. Alexei stayed with me the entire time, letting me crush his hand, wiping my forehead, whispering encouragement in English and Russian when our daughter finally arrived, screaming her displeasure at the world. He cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands. "She's perfect," he breathed, staring at the tiny red-faced bundle the nurses placed in my arms. "Emma, she's perfect." We named her Anastasia, after Alexei's grandmother, the one person from his childhood who'd shown him unconditional love. Anna, for short. Holding her, feeling her small weight against my chest, I understood completely why Alexei had been so terrified. This tiny person was everything, more precious than any empire, more important than any amount of money or power. She was our whole world condensed into 7 pounds and 3 ounces. "I would destroy anyone who tried to hurt her," Alexei said quietly, his finger traced along Anna's tiny hand. "Burn the whole city down if I had to." "I know," I replied, because I felt it too, that fierce, primal need to protect. "But hopefully it won't come to that." It didn't. Alexei's reputation, combined with his gradual shift toward legitimate business, meant that our family was largely left alone. Oh, there were always threats on the periphery, always the possibility of danger, but Dmitri and his team remained vigilant. And as Anna grew from infant to toddler, she did so in safety. She had her father's dark eyes and my stubborn streak, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger. Dmitri, the stoic killer, became putty in her hands. Irina spoiled her shamelessly. And Alexei became someone I'd never imagined that first night in the diner. He was still dangerous, still commanded respect and fear from his enemies. But he was also the man who got up for 2 a.m. feedings, who built elaborate pillow forts, who read bedtime stories in Russian until Anna fell asleep on his chest. I finished my degree and opened my own practice, focusing on helping women escape dangerous situations, a mission that felt deeply personal given my own journey. Alexei funded it quietly, never asking for recognition, content to support my work from the shadows. We had our struggles. The nature of his business meant there were always complications, always moral lines I had to navigate. We argued about security, about how much to tell Anna as she got older, about the future we were building, but we also had moments of perfect clarity. Like the morning I found Alexei in Anna's room, holding our sleeping 3-year-old while watching the sunrise through the window. "I never thought I'd have this," he said, when he noticed me in the doorway. "A family. A wife who knows exactly who I am and loves me anyway. A daughter who looks at me like I'm her hero, not her nightmare." I moved to join them, wrapping my arms around them both. "You are her hero, and mine. Even after everything, even knowing what I've done, especially because of everything," I said firmly. "You're not defined by your worst moments, Alexei. You're defined by how you chose to change, how you love us, how you protect what matters." He kissed me then, soft and sweet, careful not to wake Anna. "I love you, Emma Konstantin. Thank you for saving my life. I thought you saved mine," I replied, thinking back to that night in the diner, to the bullet and the blood, and the moment everything changed. "We saved each other," he murmured. "That's how it works." 5 years after our wedding, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I sat in our garden watching Alexei push Anna on her swing. She shrieked with delight every time she went higher, her dark curls flying, completely fearless, because she knew her father would never let her fall. My hand rested on my belly, where our second child, a boy, the ultrasound had revealed, was growing. Anna didn't know yet. We were waiting until she could understand what it meant to be a big sister. Dmitri appeared on the terrace, holding a newspaper. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, handing it to me. The headline made me smile. "Konstantin Industries donates $50 million to city hospital expansion." Legitimate, respectable. The empire Alexei had built through blood and fear was transforming into something that could be passed down to our children without shame. He'd never be completely clean. Some stains ran too deep, but he was trying, evolving, becoming the man I'd always believed he could be. "Mama, watch!" Anna called out, and I looked up to see her hanging upside down from the monkey bars while Alexei hovered nervously beneath her. "I see you, baby," I called back, my heart swelling with love so profound it almost hurt. This was my life now. Not perfect, not simple, but mine. Built from the ashes of a moment of instinct, a bullet that changed everything, and a love I never saw coming. Alexei caught my eye across the garden and smiled. That private smile that was only ever for me. In it, I saw everything we'd been through, everything we'd overcome, and everything we still had to look forward to. I'd walked into a diner tired and invisible. Just another waitress serving coffee to people who didn't see her. I'd walked out as the most important person in a dangerous man's world. And I'd somehow found home in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a man who'd sworn to protect me forever, and who'd kept that promise every single day since. The bullet scar on my shoulder would fade over time, but it would never completely disappear. And I was glad. It was a reminder of the night everything changed, the night I became brave without meaning to, the night I saved a stranger who became my whole world. "Emma," Alexei called, Anna now perched on his shoulders. "Come play with us." I pushed myself up from the chair, one hand on my growing belly, and walked toward my family, my dangerous, complicated, perfectly imperfect family. "Coming," I called back, my heart full to bursting. I'd taken a hit saving a stranger, and he'd kept his promise. He'd protected me forever. But more than that, he'd loved me. Fiercely, completely, impossibly. And that, I thought, as Alexei pulled me into his arms while Anna giggled above us, was worth every risk, every fear, every uncertain moment that had led us here. This was my happy ending, hard-won, complicated, but entirely, completely mine.